When I made a response video to movie reviewers who got triggered by Alita's breasts, I thought that they were the worst. I thought that no professional reviewer could be more incompetent, more dim-witted, and more myopic. I couldn't have been more wrong. Hello dear viewers! Since my previous dissections of incompetently written reviews of Alita were pretty well received, I decided to make another one. And if you haven't seen them, there's a link in the description. Anyway, the subject of today's video was written by MaryAnn Johanson for her website Flick Filosopher. She is the eponymous philosopher sharing her wisdom and knowledge with the masses. She also apparently likes to search for mentions of her own name, since she found my tweet mentioning her, and decided to chime in. She said that she is proud to be on the list of movie critics who trashed Alita, but praised the cinematic dumpster fire known as The Last Jedi. I didn't know how to respond to that, and frankly wasn't in the mood to have a debate with her, so I decided to post a reaction image that meant something like, yeah, okay, whatever, good for ya. This is when I discovered that most of the reaction images I have are meant to insult or make fun of people, and the closest one I could find was the photo of Trump giving 2 thumbs up. Her response was different from what I expected.
Oh, of course you are a Trump fan. Of course you are. Now I am extra proud to have pissed you off.
I don't think that I even need to explain this, but my tweet wasn't a political statement. As you've probably guessed from my accent, I'm not from the US. Trump is quite literally not my president. Besides, that was not the worst photo of Trump I could have used. Well, since I knew I was dealing with an absolute boomer, I decided to just shitpost. So my next reply was this image of the humble guac merchant himself, Jeb Bush. Her response was...
I literally have no idea what alpha male you are trotting out here. But you keep doing you, dude, while I laugh over here about your antediluvian mindset.
I replied by thanking her for confirming that she has no clue, and giving her free health advice. Turns out I overestimated her mental capacity, because she responded with,
You are so funny. I mean, not really. But the notion that you think a woman needs to be on drugs, to think you are not brilliant and insightful and wise and amazing, so cute.
Hey lady, if you don't want people to think you are doped up, don't write snort, okay? We had some more back and forth. She even came to my timeline and started responding to a tweet of mine there. But just as I started having fun with her, she blocked me. So much for not being triggered. Anyways, we're not here to discuss my Twitter shenanigans. Let's see what her review of Alita is like. Spoiler, it's bad. It's really bad. Not only are her takes complete garbage, but her writing style is just awful. I'm not even a native speaker, and yet her sentence structure makes me cringe. Well, no point in delaying it further. Let's dive in.
Ironically, a movie about a 26th century robot warrior girl assembled from scavenged bits and pieces and reanimated by a slightly mad scientist is a hellish Frankenstein monster of processed entertainment product devoid of personality and soul. This is probably unfair to Frankenstein's monster, who had more soul than Frankenstein did, but I'm sticking with a metaphor. Alita Battle Angel is an unholy mashup of Blade Runner, Rollerball, Robocop, and The Terminator, all of which, it must be noted, predate the 1990 Japanese manga by Yukito Kishiro this is based upon.
Oh boy, we've just begun with the review, and already there's so much wrong with it. For starters, I don't get why so many critics compare Alita to Blade Runner. There isn't much in common between the two. Although given that William Ladd Skinner was an art director for both Alita and Blade Runner, I'm surprised that they share so little stylistically. As for Robocop and The Terminator, Yukito Kishiro never denied that he loved those movies. If you're interested, links to both of these interviews are in the description. Check them out to learn more about where he drew inspirations from and how his manga series came to be.
That hints of more recent dystopias such as Wall-E, Elysium, and Divergent also infest this disaster might be slightly more forgivable. Maybe they were copying the graphic novel, right? I doubt it. But that still does not excuse filmmakers who have been as uniquely inventive as Rodriguez and Cameron from wallowing like this in a stew of borrowed ideas and imagery, and doing absolutely nothing fresh with them.
I could say a lot in response to this, but I'll let Nikon Planet Ripple explain it instead, since he said it better than I could. The link to the full video is in the description, and I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't yet.
Last time around, I worried people would call this a ripoff of Elysium simply because that flick with a very similar world was fortunate enough to hit theaters first. And lo and behold, that is exactly what happened, despite also being quite backwards. In fact, Alita's been accused of borrowing from every sci-fi cyberpunk film of the last few decades, when it's actually the other way around, even if not directly. I don't know how many of these critics are aware of this, but this is based on a manga from 1990. And a lot of things that may seem cliché and overdone now were not cliché in 1990.
The only thing on screen here that doesn't look and feel like stuff we've seen before a lot is the bizarrely big-eyed face of Cyborg Alita, who has a human brain but not, it seems, any other meat bits. She's just a mostly human-looking head, except for those eyes, and a bit of torso when Dr. Dyson Ida scoops her out of the scrapyard below the floating utopian metropolis of Zalem, last of the great sky cities, where all Zalem's rubbish gets dumped. Alita, as Ido dubs the Amnesia girl after he's taken her back to his cybernetics lab and given her the spare robot body he happened to have, because of reasons, just lying around, is also the last of her kind, and a big bad from up in Zalem will eventually come after her and the lost high-tech she represents.
Just lying around, eh? Because reasons? Did you watch the fucking movie? Ido didn't just have that body lying around. He made it for his daughter Alita, who tragically died before she could use it. He even named the heroine of the movie after her. This was explained in the movie in no uncertain terms, twice. How could you miss it? Also, that big bad has a name, Nova.
So, why did she get thrown out in Zalem's garbage in the first place? If Ida, in the poor slum of Iron City Underground, has the ability and the knowledge to recognize what Alita is, then there is no question that the people of Zalem would recognize her for what she is too.
Yep, that settles it. You didn't watch the film. You just got the cliff notes from someone who did. First, Ida isn't your typical Iron City inhabitant. He is from Zalem, another fact that was explained in the movie. Second, although this was not stated explicitly, it was heavily implied that the sorry state Alita was in when Ida found her is the result of her sustaining damage during the assault on Zalem and falling down. Nowhere does the movie say that she was deliberately thrown into the dumpster. The dumpster just happens to be located under Zalem. This is different from how it is in the manga, where she was executed via orbital drop.
That the big bad, played briefly on screen by Edward Norton, looks so much like James Cameron that at first I thought it was James Cameron. Gave me the icky creeps. Why is Cameron inserting himself into a story about chasing a big-eyed teenage girl around? Ugh! I was trying to talk about Alita's eyes, and instead I fell into a spiral of trying to unpick the nonsense going on here, the stuff that makes no sense, the stuff that I fear makes way too much unpleasant sense.
I don't see why you thought it was a good idea to mention how grossed out you were based on an erroneous assumption, other than to let the reader know just how illogical your thinking process is. As for nonsense, the only nonsense to unpick here is your meandering review, written as an unfiltered stream of consciousness.
Anyway, it's plain that Alita's inhumanly big eyes are meant to reflect the character's manga roots. Except everybody has huge eyes in Japanese comics. Here, only Alita does. Not even the other cyborgs, of which there are many, have eyes like that. One could argue that the big eyes were an aesthetic choice on the part of her centuries-ago makers, and indeed, we do see in her flashback memories that Alita later experiences that her fellow cyborg warriors also had the same huge eyes. But that doesn't cut it as a creative decision on the part of the filmmakers.
So you are saying that Alita is the only cyborg who has huge eyes? And that the eyes of her fellow cyborg warriors are also huge? You what, mate?
Because, as with Robocop and the Blade Runner, Alita wants us to think about what it means to be human, and yet it goes out of its way to drop us right into an uncanny valley that distances us from the humanity that it is, at least obliquely, arguing for on Alita's behalf.
So you think of people as being less than human because of how they look? You're disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Let's think about why military cyborgs might have bigger eyes than civilian ones, shall we? If you look at the animal kingdom, it's easy to see that nocturnal animals have large eyes. This is because having bigger eyes helps see better in low light condition. Same would apply to artificial eyes as well. After all, generally speaking, large image sensors, such as the ones used in DSLRs, are more sensitive to light than smaller ones, like the ones in smartphones. Large image sensors also would allow higher resolution image acquisition, and a less noisy image. Noise can be suppressed by averaging neighboring pixels. Even if the resolution far exceeds the effective resolution the human brain can adequately process, it still might be beneficial. For example, to allow digital zoom functionality. It would be like having a pair of binoculars always on hand.
Alita fails in that regard too, because the only character who even approaches coming across as an actual person here is Waltz's Ido, a charming, melancholy figure with a complex backstory and plausible, if sometimes cliched, motivations. The film is a lot more sympathetic to him than it is to Alita, who is nothing but a naive blank slate, literally. She remembers nothing of her past before Ido reanimated her, left to the mercy of the lies and manipulations of men around her, including those of charming Ido.
Melancholy figure? Did you mean melancholic? Alita is not a blank slate. Just because she doesn't remember her past doesn't mean she has no personality. Quite the contrary. We can see her ideals and passions shine through. She gets excited by motorball. She gets filled with righteous anger when she sees despicable acts. She strives to be her own person, despite Ido's attempt to mold her into something she isn't. Not to mention that she slowly regains her memories during the course of the film. And what lies are we talking about here? The only lie from Ido was lie of omission. He didn't tell Alita that she was a berserker in her previous life. This wasn't an attempt to maliciously manipulate her, but rather an expression of fatherly concern for the future of his surrogate daughter. How would you feel if your daughter wanted to become a bounty hunter?
But it's even worse than that. Alita is the epitome of cinema's problem of the strong female character, the demand for which the male filmmakers who dominate Hollywood have taken not to mean psychologically robust, flawed human people who happen to be women, but literally physically strong, aggressive fighters as long as they are still hot. Ass-kicking babes have become something of a fetish on screen, and Alita is little more than that. There is, of course, nothing inherently wrong with a female character who is physically strong and an able warrior. The problem is when that's all she is. And this is the totality of Alita as a character. She is nothing but a robot warrior, and she doesn't even have to work at it. She just automatically, instinctively uses whatever training, or more insidiously, programming she once had.
Oh, here we go again. No honest person who actually saw the movie would have the audacity to say that Alita is nothing more than a physically strong, aggressive fighter. Reducing her to a weapon of war would be objectification, which is a big no-no for feminists. Unless they are the ones doing it, of course. For shame, MaryAnn, for shame. As for Alita not having to work to become a warrior, if you actually saw the movie, you'd notice that her flashbacks included combat training. She wasn't programmed. You yourself said that she has a human brain, and yet now you call her a robot. Make up your mind. Oh, and speaking of her strength, her first body was never designed for combat. Ida initially made it for his daughter. It might have been stronger than a normal human, but in no way comparable to heavy-duty bionics used by hunter warriors or motorball players. The movie even acknowledges it. In a conversation between Nova, Kieran and Vector, Nova explains that Alita managed to defeat cyborgs bigger and stronger than her, not with brute force, but by employing a martial art known as Panzerkunst. By being agile and hitting the weak points of the opponents, Alita can defeat enemies that severely outclass her.
And naturally, because she is a robot, not a meatbag woman with a body of flesh and bone, she is not off-puttingly muscular or even physically threatening until she leaps into action. She is still slim and, with the help of those huge eyes, cute. Alita is an example of another trope that needs to die, born sexy yesterday.
Wait, so are the big eyes freakish or cute? Make up your mind already. And yes, I'm glad she wasn't off-puttingly muscular. Concerning the born sexy yesterday trope, I already debunked the claim that it applies to Alita. See my video, Alita Battle Angel vs. the Mary Sue and the Incompetence of Media Critics. Link in the description. Or check out the videos made by Nick on Planet Ripple for a slightly different take. As for the slim part, this sounds suspiciously similar to complaints from several other reviews, confirming my suspicion that these movie reviewers have a secret mailing list similar to Game Journal Pros that got busted a while back. I dealt with the whining of insecure feminists who are triggered because a fictional character looks better than them in my Shills vs. Alita Cybertits series. I'll leave links in the description so you can check them out if you haven't yet.
Because Alita is so powerful, she can sign up to be one of Iron City's hunter-warrior bounty hunters, and then train to play in the Motorball arena where cyborgs battle for the acclaim of the city and the right to ascend to Zalem. Which means that an ungodly amount of the unconscionably 2-hour 22-minute runtime of this movie is given over to robot battles of one sort or another.
Yeah, who would ever want to see cyborgs duke it out? That's so boring, right? As for 2-hour 22-minute runtime, you couldn't even get that part right.
Often these are incomprehensible. More often, the justification for them are buried under a mountain of world-building info dumps.
Incomprehensible, you say? Funny that neither I, nor anyone I've talked to about the movie, had any problem comprehending the plot. Maybe you are just stupid.
Characters, Meatbag and Cyborg, undergo ridiculous changes of heart, particularly in the final few minutes of the film, as if everyone involved suddenly realized they needed to start wrapping things up.
What are you talking about? The only character that remotely fits this description would be Nova, with his decision to let Alita go and allow her to get away with killing Vector and trashing his office. Why did he do that? Maybe he thought that trying to gun Alita down was too much trouble and ultimately not worth it. After all, she wiped the floor with Centurions in the lobby. Or more likely, because it wasn't as generous of a gift as it seemed. Nova almost certainly was the one who sent Hunter Warriors after Hugo. Nova is a diabolical kind of character. He is barely in the film, and yet his presence and influence are felt throughout the entire movie. If he let Alita go, then it means that he has other plans for her.
And still, Alita ends with the threat of a sequel. Better if it just end.
Did you mean if it just ended? Lady, if you are writing reviews, then at least get your grammar in order. Then again, you spell philosopher with an F. So that's par for the course with you. Also, it would be much better if movie critics just ended. Let the critics die. Kill them if you have to. Speaking of The Last Jedi, let's take a look at MaryAnn's review of that pile of garbage.
This is not going to go the way you think, Luke Skywalker says to, well, someone who needs to hear it. Someone whose arrogance is born of short-sightedness and narrow expectations. And this is also Star Wars The Last Jedi's word of warning to the audience, to us. This is the Star Wars movie, after all, from writer-director Rian Johnson, the guy who gave us The Brother Bloom, a tricksy movie about con artists that knows we got into a movie about con artists with certain assumptions about what we are about to see.
People expected to see a good movie, but their expectations were subverted.
This is The Force Awakens' Empire Strikes Back. We know it, and Johnson knows we know it. And he's going to play with every anticipation he knows we will be bringing into his little space opera action fantasy. And indeed, there are many callbacks to Empire here. The smallest ones are visual and often clever. The rebel hideaway planet that looks like Hoth is covered not with snow but salt. Or shiver-inducing, Imperial walkers stomping across the salt. But those are ultimately inconsequential.
Yeah, everyone noticed that The Last Jedi is extremely derivative and unoriginal. But it's not the same. It's salt, not snow. We are not ripping off any brand when we call our sneakers Abibus. Honest, governor.
The significant callbacks are the ones that tease our nerdy conjectures, but pay them off in ways that make it impossible to call it a Xerox of Empire. The relationship of Rey, who is strong with the Force, and Jedi Master Luke, and her sojourn on the rocky water planet of his self-exile, might recall Luke's visit to Yoda on Dagobah. There's even a forbidding tree where Rey makes a discovery about the Force, but this will be very different for both of them. Snoke, who is strong with the dark side of the Force, and is the galaxy's new evil overlord, and Kylo, his apprentice, have a dynamic that might echo that of the Emperor and Vader, but that's not quite what's going on here either.
I'm not seeing how listing the similarities between The Last Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back is helping your case. So there are some minor differences. That doesn't change the fact that Ryan is a hack, who lifted entire plot threads from the original trilogy.
Previously, the series had been deeply concerned with matters of great bloodlines, princesses and priests, but Last Jedi centers characters who are ordinary people. Finn, the deserting stormtrooper who works sanitation back on the Starkiller base of Awakens, is back and teams up with Rose Tico, a maintenance engineer on a resistance ship, for a grand subplot of an adventure in a casino planet that seems to be the galaxy's Monaco.
So was Han Solo a royalty or a priest? Also, the space casino subplot was stupid and pointless, and so was Rose.
But perhaps most astonishing of all is the lashing Johnson delivers to the very notion of stereotypical heroics, the stuff the Star Wars saga has been built on. Selfish heroics do not win the day. Real heroism is quiet and self-sacrificing, not boisterous and self-aggrandizing. Some of this is explored in the story thread involving Resistance pilot Poe Dameron and Resistance leader Vice Admiral Holdo, who deems him a trigger-happy flyboy.
Ah yes, Vice Admiral Gender Studies. Arrogant and incompetent. Her demeanor would better fit a First-Order officer, and even then it would be too over-the-top authoritarian. What's the message here? That subordinates must blindly follow orders? This is how war crimes are committed.
All of the women of The Last Jedi, here at what feels like a last stand for the Resistance against the evil First Order, have just about had it with the men thinking they can get away with being jerks if they are also heroic.
Yeah, those damn men. Who does Poe think he is? So he took out the Starkiller base and potentially saved countless billions of lives? Big deal. He's a man, and therefore should know his place. Down with the tyranny of the patriarchy. Woman, rise up!
But mostly, this is a terrific film, and truly exciting as Star Wars. It is full of humor and courage and often dazzling and even shocking imagery.
Oh, it's shocking alright.
That Rian Johnson has managed to make me both hopeful and hopeless at the same time is a wonder.
The real wonder is why anyone takes a hack fraud like yourself seriously. You can't even write properly. What's up with all the run-in sentences? Anyone who gives Alita 0 stars and The Last Jedi 4.5 stars out of 5 should not be taken seriously, ever. Phew, that was quite a trip. Responding to these articles is a very unusual experience. Both fun and rage-inducing at the same time. I hope you enjoyed the video. I assume you did since you are still here. Why not check out my other videos dissecting the articles about Alita written by hack frauds? Link to the playlist should appear on the screen right about now. It's also in the description. In any case, thanks for watching and see you next time.